Imagine it's a freezing morning in January 2026, and you've just stepped off a flight at Charles de Gaulle Airport. Your suitcase is packed with resumes, dreams, and visions of a beautiful life in France. What are you expecting? Lazy afternoons in cafes? That legendary 35-hour workweek? Free universal healthcare? Or that work-life balance that makes American capitalism look like a prison? You think you are stepping into a European paradise. But what if I told you that you have just landed in a country experiencing a slow death? A country where government debt will hit 120% of GDP by 2027, has changed 6 prime ministers in 2 years, and young people are fleeing at the fastest rate in history. This isn't alarmist talk. This is the reality of France in 2026. Even scarier is that France's virus is infecting the entire Western world. Today, I'm going to rip off the Instagram filters and reveal a shocking reality. Why France, the self-proclaimed birthplace of human rights and the Enlightenment, is becoming the first domino to fall in the collapse of Western prosperity. Are you ready? Imagine you are a 25-year-old math genius who just graduated from the École Normale Supérieure in Paris. You studied hard for 7 years at France's toughest institution and survived competition even more brutal than Harvard. Now you've found your dream job as an R&D engineer in Lyon. Full of anticipation, you open your first payslip. Net income, 1,680 euros. Now think about your high school classmate, the guy who couldn't even figure out fractions, who is now working as a cashier in a supermarket. His monthly salary? According to the latest SMIC data in 2026, which is France's minimum wage standard, 1,443 euros. The gap between you? 237 euros. The return on 7 years of higher education is worth a difference of only 34 euros per year. At this rate, you'd have to live to be 150 to recoup your educational investment. This isn't an isolated case. This is late-stage cancer for the French economy. Economists have given this phenomenon a sounding academic name, smicardisation, which basically means the minimum wage has flattened all wages. In 2026, over 18% of the French workforce earns minimum wage, whereas 20 years ago, this figure was less than 10%. But the absurdity continues. To hire you, the engineer, the company actually has to shell out almost double the salary you take home. You take 1,680 euros, while the company's actual cost is about 3,200 euros. Where did the remaining 1,520 euros go? Into various taxes and fees you will never figure out. Social security, unemployment insurance, pensions, and all sorts of strange levies invented annually by the French government. The result? Employers discovered a cruel reality. It is more cost-effective to hire 2 cashiers than to give 1 engineer a raise. So, France's wage structure has been flattened into a pancake. The bottom is rising, but the ceiling is nailed shut. Hard work? Innovation? Forget it. In France, mediocrity is king. Now let's calculate the cost of housing. Want to rent a 20-square-meter shoebox in Paris? According to the latest data from 2025, the average is 31 euros per square meter. A studio apartment where you can touch the fridge from your bed starts at 1,500 euros a month. Do the simple math. 1,680 euros income minus 1,500 euros rent leaves you with 180 euros to survive the month. Congratulations! Welcome to the Adult Baby Club. 30-year-old engineers squeezing in with their parents, or 4 people splitting the rent for a tiny room. This isn't living. This is a mathematically impossible equation. Drive 2 hours north from the Champs-Élysées, and you enter another world. This used to be the industrial heart of France, But now it looks like ruins bombed by a neutron bomb. Rusty factories, overgrown parking lots, and for sale and demolition signs everywhere. This place used to produce cars, steel, and chemicals, supporting thousands of families. Now the biggest employers are Amazon distribution centers and a few supermarket chains. Welcome to France's museum economy, where only the industrial shells remain for display. Numbers don't lie. France's manufacturing sector now accounts for only 10.7% of GDP. Germany is at 19.9%, Italy at 16.6%, and even Poland has 18.1%. Over the past 40 years, France has essentially committed industrial suicide. Why? Because the elites in Paris were captivated by a fatal fantasy that France could skip manufacturing and go straight to the post-industrial era. They felt factories were too dirty and outdated, and that France's future should be elegant: consulting firms, design studios, and luxury management. They dreamed of turning the whole country into a giant Chanel showcase. To some extent, they succeeded. France indeed became the world's #1 tourist destination, attracting 90 million visitors annually. But here is a small problem. You can't build a superpower with waiters and tour guides. While Germans were building BMWs, the French were discussing art. While the Chinese were building factories, the French were protecting historical buildings. What happened during the 2020 pandemic perfectly illustrated this absurdity. The French government discovered with horror that this former scientific powerhouse couldn't even produce basic paracetamol. The country that invented the theory of vaccines had to beg India and China for painkillers. A dignified nuclear power that couldn't even manage fever reducers. The real tragedy lies at the human level. When a factory closes, the whole community dies. Young people flee, shops close, schools merge, and no one takes over when doctors retire. Eventually, these once thriving towns are left with only the elderly, the unemployed, and a despair of being abandoned by civilization. This is the truth behind the Yellow Vest movement, and why far-right parties are rampant in this forgotten France. These people aren't being racist. They are crying out in despair. We used to have jobs, dignity, and a future. And now we have nothing. Now let's talk about France's most dangerous secret, that looming debt bomb. Imagine France as a friend of yours, a friend who knows no restraint. In 2024, this friend's credit card debt was already equivalent to 113% of their annual income. Even scarier, he keeps swiping the card, expecting it to reach 120% by 2027. But the most terrifying part is yet to come. The French government will pay 59.3 billion euros in interest in 2026, a 64% increase from 2020. Let me put it more intuitively. France will soon spend more on debt interest than its entire education budget. That's right, a country spending more on paying interest for past debts than on cultivating the next generation. This isn't economic policy. This is intergenerational theft. Even crazier is that France hasn't balanced a budget for 52 consecutive years. 52 years. Since 1974, every French government, left or right, has been spending tomorrow's money today. This set a world record, just not one to be proud of. French spending on Social Security accounts for 32% of GDP, the highest in the world. Sounds generous, but where does the money come from? France's economic growth is slow, 0.7% in 2025, and projected at 0.9% in 2026. It's like maintaining a Ferrari lifestyle with a bicycle engine. What's worse is that France can't print money to solve the problem like the US does. France uses the euro, and monetary policy is controlled by the European Central Bank. When the crisis truly hits, France will rely entirely on the mercy of the bond market and the patience of German taxpayers. It's like handing your fate over to the kindness of strangers. If you think high taxes are just a numbers game, let me tell you a real story about starting a business. Imagine you decide to open a company in France. You have a brilliant idea, invest all your savings, work day and night, and finally earn your first 100,000 euros. Ready to celebrate? Wait, let's first calculate how much you can actually take home. Corporate profit first pays 33% corporate income tax, leaving 67,000 euros. Want to distribute it to yourself as dividends? Pay another 30% dividend tax, leaving 46,900 euros. Want to pay yourself a salary? Pay another 45% personal income tax and 20% social security fees. In the end, out of your 100,000 euros profit, roughly only 20,000 to 30,000 euros actually enters your pocket. The remaining 70 to 80% is swallowed by various taxes. And that's not counting property tax, VAT, and various bizarre taxes invented by the government every year. The average French taxpayer works until mid-July before they start earning money for themselves. The first half of the year's income all goes to taxes. This is no joke. This is official data. The result? The smartest and most ambitious French people are fleeing. Not because they don't love France, but because France's system systematically punishes success and rewards mediocrity. In France, if you are smart enough to create wealth, the government will ensure you don't get to keep it. Every morning at 8 a.m., the language heard most in London's Canary Wharf isn't English, but French. French conversations rise and fall in San Francisco coffee shops. French accented English is everywhere in Singapore's financial district. This isn't cultural exchange. This is the largest intellectual hemorrhage France has ever experienced. The data is shocking. According to the latest OECD data, about 104,000 young French people leave their homeland for other OECD countries every year, and many never return. Even worse, those leaving aren't a random crowd, but France's elite. The engineers, doctors, scientists, and entrepreneurs who should be building France's future. Let's take a specific example. A software engineer just graduated from École Polytechnique, earns 35,000 euros a year in France, netting about 2,200 euros a month after tax. But Google offers him a position in Dublin with an annual salary of 65,000 euros, netting 4,000 euros a month after tax, with broader career prospects and a friendlier startup environment. Is there even a choice to be made? What's more heartbreaking is that this brain drain is accelerating. As the best French people leave, the remaining environment becomes more mediocre, which encourages more people to leave, creating a vicious cycle. The French government realizes this problem too, and has launched various return bonus policies, but the effect is minimal. The reason is simple. When a 30-year-old French engineer in Silicon Valley has equity, a high salary, and enjoys infinite possibilities, what can France offer to attract him back? A compressed wage structure? A 70% tax rate? Or endless bureaucracy? The answer is already written on the plane ticket. Imagine you get sick in France and need to go to the emergency room. You arrive at the hospital, and the nurse tells you, "Wait, there are 47 people ahead of you." 12 hours later, you finally see a doctor. This isn't exaggeration. This is the daily reality of the French healthcare system in 2026. Wait, doesn't France have the world's best healthcare system? That's in the past tense. Rural France now has over 8,000 medical deserts, where you can't find a general practitioner within dozens of kilometers. Why? For decades, France artificially limited medical school admissions, thinking too many doctors would push up medical costs. The result? A severe shortage of doctors, and the remaining ones are overwhelmed, retiring, or fleeing to private healthcare. The education system is also crumbling. French students have fallen from the world top 10 to 20th place in international math tests. Why? Teachers are underpaid, working conditions are deteriorating, and many are changing careers. Now, some schools in France have to hire people without teaching qualifications to fill vacancies. The judicial system? Serious backlog of cases. The average wait from filing to trial is 2 years. The transport system? The TGV high-speed train that was once the envy of the world is now frequently delayed due to breakdowns from a lack of maintenance funds. This is the paradox of the French model. The French pay the highest taxes in the world, yet get increasingly worse public services in return. That unwritten social contract, we take half your money and give you world-class services, is bankrupt. The result is that the wealthy are starting to opt out of the public system, sending children to private schools, going to private hospitals, and hiring private security. This creates a dual society. The rich buy quality services with money, while the middle class and the poor are trapped in a deteriorating public system. Those words carved on the doors of French town halls, liberty, equality, fraternity, are starting to look like a cruel joke. Here is a shocking statistic. For years in a row, the French have been rated the most pessimistic people in the world. Not Afghans, not Syrians, but the French living in this country with free healthcare, 5 weeks of paid vacation, and the world's best cheese. Why is a country with such superior material conditions so despairing? The answer lies in the huge gulf between expectation and reality. The French are taught from childhood that they are part of a great nation, that their country is the birthplace of human rights, the cradle of the Enlightenment, and the center of world civilization. They are told that French is the language of diplomacy, and French culture is the global benchmark. But growing up, they see a country whose global influence is in constant decline. English, not French, has become the global business language. Hollywood, not French cinema, dominates world entertainment. Silicon Valley, not Paris, has become the synonym for innovation. Imagine you were told from childhood that you were a king, only to grow up and find you don't even count as an aristocrat. This psychological drop is devastating. This collective depression has self-reinforcing properties. Pessimistic consumers don't dare to spend, keeping savings rates high. Pessimistic entrepreneurs don't dare to start businesses because failure is a lifelong stain in France, unlike in the US, where failure is seen as a necessary path to success. Pessimistic voters choose extreme parties because they believe the whole system is rigged against them. This psychological weight may be the biggest challenge France faces. You can change tax laws in a few months, but you can't change a national mindset in a few years. France is now trapped in a vicious cycle. The obsession with decline makes it harder for them to unite and implement the reforms that are truly needed. Now, before you sit in Chicago, New York, or London sneering at France's plight, let me give you a warning. France is not the exception. It is the prophecy. France is showing us what happens when a wealthy Western democracy reaches its limit. It is a testing ground for a specific economic pathology, and this pathology is infecting the entire Western world. Look at the symptoms. An aging population. France hit the demographic wall first, and the US is 10 years behind. Deindustrialization. France destroyed its manufacturing base earlier and more thoroughly, but the American Rust Belt and Britain's northern industrial areas are telling the same terrible story. Debt addiction. France's 120% debt to GDP ratio is shocking, but the US is catching up fast, running trillion-dollar deficits in peacetime. Political polarization. France's centrist parties have collapsed. The socialists and Republicans are basically dead, and the far right and far left are rising. This is a preview of the political polarization in the US, the UK, and many Western countries. France is the laboratory. It is trying to maintain 20th century living standards with 21st century demographics and 19th century industrial thinking. If France collapses, if the bond market finally loses confidence in French debt, and if the EU has to bail out Europe's second largest economy, this won't just be a French problem. It will be a global financial tsunami, an upgraded version of the 2008 financial crisis, just served with French wine and angrier protesters. So when you look at France, don't just see a troubled country. See a warning flare, a time machine showing you the possible future of your own country if hard choices aren't made. So, is France destined to become a European economic museum? A place where tourists toss coins to the locals? Not necessarily. History tells us that France is an amazingly resilient country. This nation, which has survived the 100 Years' War, the Revolution, 2 world wars, and Nazi occupation to rise again, has a stubbornness in its bones that refuses to lose. And there are indeed some positive signals. The Paris startup ecosystem, Station F, is growing. There is a generation of young French people tired of old dogmas. They want to work, build, disrupt, and are fighting against the gravity of the system. But the math is ruthless. The debt is real. The aging population is real. And the relative poverty of the middle class is real. France is now living on borrowed time and borrowed money. The illusion of prosperity is maintained by debt, and social peace is maintained by money the government doesn't have. The question isn't whether the correction is coming, but exactly when it will arrive. For you, wherever you are, the lesson is simple. Don't let postcards fool you, and don't let luxury brands distract you. Most importantly, look at your own country's balance sheet. Because France's disease is contagious, and you might have already been infected. After watching this video, do you still have romantic illusions about France? Do you think your country is heading down a similar path? Tell me your thoughts in the comments section, and don't forget to like and share so more people can see the truth hidden behind the postcards. Subscribe to my channel, and together we will uncover more economic realities behind appearances. Because in this world full of uncertainty, the only certainty is nothing is certain.